Hi guys, you okay? Mup, you okay? James, Andy. Hi Paul. Yes, good evening everybody. Yes, Adam, same haircut as you. Hi Paul. All good, all good. Right, just gonna add Steve.
Hello, mate.
Hi Steve, how are you, mate?
I'm very good. How are you?
Very good, mate. Very good. Good. Been good to see the walks you've been getting out on, mate. Another good walk today.
Yeah, just over 11 miles I did today. The only reason it was that length is because I got lost twice. But it was good, you know. It was Castle Eden. It was nice, you know. You get out there in fresh air and stuff like that. And I'll be having a kind of a day off tomorrow, especially from walking. I'll do some gym stuff.
Yeah.
But on Wednesday, I'll be going back to Osmotherley and doing another walk along there with the missus. So looking forward to that.
What are you in training for? Just for those people who don't know, Steve, because obviously not everybody's on Twitter and they might not know what you're up to.
Well, first and foremost, it's basically just getting out, and it's just trying to get your mind right. And because obviously we're doing it, what we are doing it for is mental health, and obviously in support of the NHS. But we're hoping to get out next year on the 13th of July to do Kilimanjaro. And that is basically to raise awareness for mental health. But at the same time, it's just whilst we're training for that, certainly I am, and I know the rest of the boys are as well. It's great to actually get out. I mean, I've seen you on walks and stuff like that, and I think sometimes just to get out, even if it's for half an hour or 10 minutes, 20 minutes, you know, it's not how far you go, it's not how long it is. It's not a race. It's basically just to get out, clear your head, get a little bit of activity, you know, get the heart pumping a little bit. And I think it does you a power of good.
Yeah, I think you're right, mate. I mean, it was one of those things I decided early on. Obviously, as soon as the gyms closed, it was a case of, you know, I need to do something. And if I don't, then, you know, I'm you know, you're just going to sit at home. It's no good for you. So, you know, doing the walk to the Tyne Bridge has become like a, you know, it's a pilgrimage. But you know, I'm basically getting as far as the Millennium Bridge, walking back. It's a good 3 mile walk from me each day. So you know, it's good. Gets you out. You see different people. You go at different times. Obviously, you know, sometimes it's boiling hot. We've had some great weather, and the other times it's not so good. But yeah, it's just getting out, getting fresh air, and it's having that part of your routine as well. You know, it takes you, you know, an hour and a half of your day to do that, and it's, you know, it's valuable time, as you say. The mental health thing is one of those things. And I think the takeover, I've seen a lot of people asking about, I think the Chronicles put something up tonight about, is the takeover affecting people's mental health? And I think it probably is, because, you know, it's dragging on, and because we're sitting at home, mate, watching and waiting for news and reading every single thing that you know, journalists are putting out there, it's going to have an effect, isn't it, on people's mental health?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it doesn't have to be something which is a major story. It could just be whatever's personal to you that could have an effect. And of course, all the other big things probably has a knock-on effect. You know, I mean, not only have we got the pandemic, there's obviously what's happened, you know, with the racism and all that kind of thing, which is going on at the moment, the protests down in London. But it doesn't have to be anything majorly significant to, you know, that's like worldwide or in this country. It could just be something which is just triggers you a little bit. And I think, as I said, I mean, my missus works from home. So, you know, we get up at 7 in the morning and we go for like a half an hour walk just so she can get out. And then she's sat at the desk, but it's the dining room table where she does her work. And And if I'm not either training or going for a walk, I'm just going to be sat in the house. There's nothing for me to do, really. So why not go out? Why not spend a couple of hours and get some fresh air? And, you know, you do see some people. I've noticed on the walks that I've been doing the last couple of weeks, you tend to bump into the same people, just say hello. And it's nice just to actually see other people for a change.
Yeah, of course it is, mate. Tom Dixon says this will be the 9th week of the takeover. 11 weeks being locked down, which you know, it puts, you know, it puts it into perspective. Really, 9 weeks isn't a great deal of time. I know a lot of people have been saying that the Man City takeover was done in 23 days or something, but I'm sure it wasn't done 23 days start to finish. I think, you know, it would have taken a lot longer. It's probably 23 days of being in the public eye that people knew that it was going to happen, but it probably went on a bit longer, Steve.
Absolutely. I think that's the key thing. I think with the Man City one, I bet it was going on behind the scenes for a very, very long time. And then all of a sudden it just became public, and then it looked as though it was done straight away. The Newcastle one seems to have been public and got in the public domain reasonably early.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's been a lot of work done in the background, but it getting out. And I think if people weren't aware of what was going on, then it would probably seem quite short. But because we knew about it sort of 9 weeks ago, feels as though it's dragging on a little bit, but as I said, look, it'll happen, but it's just a case of when.
Dean Skelton says it's the 9th of June tomorrow.
I know.
There's been a few people trying to wind you up, Steve, about that. I see Steve Howey did not say the 9th of June. It was somebody who messaged in when we were doing the podcast. So that's all anybody needs to know. And all anybody needs to know about the 9th of June is it's the day of the Bladen races. So, you know, from our perspective, we're not putting much onto that date. Wayne Gilmore says he switched off from the takeover talk last week. Are we at the same stage, he says, as we have been for the last month or so? Well, yeah, because we don't know.
Well, yeah, pretty much. I mean, as I said, it's, again, I'll read kind of stuff which George Culkin will put on social media, and he hasn't put on a great deal, let's be honest, because there's nothing happening and there's nothing really to report. You know, it'll be done when it's done. It kind of is frustrating, but that's just the way it is. You know, fretting and worrying about it and kind of wanting it even more so isn't going to move it any quicker.
No, Tom's asking what we thought of George's tweet this morning, but I mean, basically, he just put a tweet out trying to explain, you know, the situation with regards to the you know, the beIN Sport complaint, you know, and I think it was just a simple layman's term article which essentially told us what the issue is, you know, and whether this, you know, whether this potential documentation that's going to be released on the 16th of June is suddenly going to show Saudi were responsible or whatever, and whether that's going to have a knock-on effect. Nobody knows. No, you know, there's a lot of speculation about that, but nobody actually knows if that's what's holding the process up, do they?
Well, they don't. I mean, obviously, this has come to light with piracy stuff and you know, human rights and that kind of stuff as well. Listen, the Premier League will be interested about trying to get people that's going to come into the country and you know, benefit clubs, benefit sort of around the area of Newcastle for businesses and, you know, all that kind of thing. And it will only have a positive effect. And I think looking at it, whilst, you know, you look at the different points that have been made by people that don't want this takeover to go through, I think there's a lot more positives than would come out of this when the deal goes through. As I said, when the deal goes through, because I do believe it will go through. But yeah, as I said, it is taking its time. But that's just because we've known about it for a long time.
I've got to be honest, most of the guys who I've spoken to, Steve, yeah, I'm sure you'll have seen some of them, even those who are usually very sceptical, people like Nash and Supermark and people who don't hold much, you know, hope in takeovers going through because of Mike Ashley, really, all believe that this is genuine and it's going to go through. I've never heard one dissenting voice to say that it won't go through. And, you know, let's just wait and see. I've literally switched off. I know it sounds daft because I'm doing one of these every night, but I have just switched off to it and just thought it'll happen when it's going to happen, you know. And I don't take the silence as something which is, you know, which is a downside to it. I take it as a positive because it just means the press are running out of things to write. And if they're running out of things to write, to start rehashing stuff and start putting, you know, a different slant, as we saw the other week when that article was released and they're throwing a couple of words around in a paper and it was basically the same article, you know. Moving away from the takeover, Q-Tech Shop says evening, guys. Do you think the players will be given that bit extra in these 9 games to be part of the future plans involved in the takeover? So he just thinks, do you think that the players will be given that much more?
Of an opportunity, you mean? Of being at the club?
Do you think they'll be putting a bit more weight in? Yeah.
I think everybody's got to be given an opportunity, and I think that includes the manager as well. Listen, do I think that Steve eventually will become collateral damage in this takeover? Probably yes. I think Steve backs himself that if he was given some cash, he'd be able to do well. I've got no doubt that he probably would. But unfortunately, what tends to happen is new owners want new people in completely, and they want to restructure. When that happens, i.e. a new manager tends to have different ideas to the one that's been there previous and tends to change the team. Sometimes it's just wideswept and it's the full lot. Eventually just go, and then you'll start next season, you'll hardly recognise the team. But obviously lads have got a perfect opportunity and a great opportunity to be part of something special. I think when you look at kind of myself and Steve Watson, Rob Elliott, Lee Clark, we were at a club that was basically on its backside. We were young kids as well, but we were fortunate enough, whilst the manager came in with Kevin, he was wanting to change absolutely everything, and he did. But if you're good enough, you get kept around. It's as simple as that. Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of talk this morning, and again, it comes down to a newspaper article about Dan Barlasser. I mean, being offered an extension on his contract. Shola, waxing lyrical about him, saying that he's vastly improved from the player that Rafa Benitez gave the opportunity to under his spell. And then people reading into the fact that, Steve Bruce had allegedly said that Barlasser was part of his plans, could be utilised in the first team. Now, that kind of reporting, again, I'm not sure who wrote the article. I know it was the Daily Mail. One would surmise it could be Craig Grove. I don't know whether it was Craig or not, and I apologise if it wasn't. But it's a kind of story which you think, well, again, it just had people in a meltdown, thinking the takeover was off, thinking that Steve Bruce was now talking about using Barlasser as a first team squad member for next season, and it had just been announced in a press conference or something. It was quite misleading. That I did read the section of the article that somebody tweeted. So it's those kind of things don't help. But again, reading through NUFC.com today as well, Steve was talking about a lot of the players who, potentially whose contracts are coming to an end. I mean, we know about the Matty Longstaff situation. We've talked about that last week. But we've got Andy Carroll, who again is fit. He's ready to play. But his contract's coming to an end in the middle of these games. So what do you think is going to happen with those people? Do you think as a player, somebody like Andy Carroll's going to want to sign a short-term deal? Is that going to be beneficial to him? Is it something that his agent's going to want him to do? I mean, how do you get out of those kind of particular holes?
I think you'll tend to find there's a lot of players within the leagues that their contract will have been up now, really, pretty much. So, look, if they want to play, they'll have to sign a contract which goes to the end of this season. And I think then they've got an opportunity to perform. If they perform, then there's a very good chance the club might say, "I tell you what, we'll give you a better deal." But if they don't, then they move on. I mean, look, we've had the issues with the lad. I forget where he's at. Is he Charlton, who's refusing to play because of injury and stuff like that. And listen, I get where the lad's coming from. I don't agree with it, but I kind of get where he's coming from. But these lads at the end of the contract, unfortunately, this is unprecedented circumstances. And they have to put themselves in the shop window, and I would imagine somebody like Andy Carroll, because he has missed an awful lot of games, he would sort of say, "Listen, I'll play till the end of the season."
Yeah.
If he's fit and he does well, then there's a very good chance he might get offered a year. If he doesn't, then I'm sure the club will just try to offload him, like a lot of clubs will be doing with a lot of players.
Do you think the club have done the right thing with Longstaff? I mean, he's only played 6 games. I know he's a young lad. I know he's a Geordie. Do you think they've, I think they've upped the offer. We're being told that they've upped the offer, but it's nowhere near the 30 grand a week that Udinese have offered. So I suppose 2 questions. Do you think the club are doing the right thing, bearing in mind the experience he's had? And if you were Matty Longstaff in his position, at his age, would you jump at going to Udinese of all places, and would 30 grand a week in this current day and age be a good contract? 30 grand a week be a contract that you would be happy with?
I think first and foremost, I think as a young player coming through, and I think Lee Clark will tell you this, Watt will tell you this, Rob Elliott will tell you this, the club, and it's not just Newcastle, it's any club, they'll always try and get you on the cheap because they'll think, well, you've come through the ranks and you should just be happy to play for the club, which everybody is absolutely honoured to play for the club, but they just expect you to play for basically nothing. Of course, his agent will have heard the different rumours and people's interested. Obviously, Udinese, for me personally, he hasn't played that many games. He looks a very, very good prospect. I think if he goes to Udinese, he might be picking up different money, but for me, he could just be lost. I think he could go there and basically disappear. But if he's lined his pockets and some players are happy with that, well then fair enough. But for me, I would sort of try and negotiate to get a little bit more of what he was getting. I know the club have offered, but try and sort of ply your work, ply your trade at a club which he loves, and try and get more game time. Listen, if he doesn't get more game time, then look, I would imagine another club would probably sign him on for the amount of money, or maybe it's just a little bit more that he's getting offered at Newcastle. But the lad, for me, the most important thing, it's not the money, because money never ever sort of got me kind of that way. I'm still not bothered about money. I'm not that arsed about it, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
I think he just needs to play games. He needs to play, and he needs to play consistently, and that's the big thing for him at the moment.
He could end up in the Premiership though, because of course Udinese are linked with Watford, aren't they? And there is that possibility that he could go to Udinese and then be loaned to Watford, which would be a right kick in the nuts for Newcastle.
Well, it could. I mean, as I said, stranger things have happened. Obviously, with these links with some of the Italian clubs and owners and stuff like that, that could definitely happen. But as I said, for me, I think he's got to look at his football. As I said, look, the money will come. If you're good enough, money will come. It's as simple as that. For me, I just think he should want to play games, and I'm sure he does. I'm sure he's got that attitude about him. But I can understand as well, because, as I said, it's not just Newcastle; it's all clubs that when they have kids coming through, unless you're an absolute, Raheem Sterling or a Michael Owen of years gone by. You tend to just like, well, we'll put you on basically the minimum. And I know we're talking about a lot of money here, which is an awful lot more money than, the everyday person gets. But in all fairness, in this day and age, the amount of money that footballers getting, bang average footballers are getting, is astronomical. So he'll be thinking, well, I want a piece of the pie. But at the same time, he's played 6 games. It's not a lot of games. I mean, if I had played 6 games and all of a sudden being offered 15, 20 grand, I know what I would have snapped the hands off. I mean, I was playing in the first team and I was still earning £250 a week. It's miles away now, the amount of money that players are getting.
Yeah. Abhish says, will Premier League allow the fans in stadiums for the last 2 to 3 games? I mean, after watching all of these riots and protests, Steve, I mean, what's the difference between thousands of people walking up the mall and chasing policemen all over the place yesterday and pulling monuments down and vandalising things to going and standing in a football match? There's no difference, is there? Well,
he isn't, to be quite honest. I mean, this is where, and yet nothing really is mentioned about it until, like, you kind of, when you do take a look back, you think, well, how is this all social distancing? Listen, I think fans being in the grounds are quite a long way away. I know the football season starts again next Wednesday, which I'm looking forward to, and thankfully get out of the house more than just walking.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be a while before we get fans. I heard some story about you might be able to get like 10,000 fans each for the FA Cup final. But even then, fair enough, they might be spaced out. But how do you get them coming in at different times? Are they going to be slotted at a time for when you can go into the ground, and the public transport and all this kind of thing? It's just going to be an absolute nightmare. So unless there's vaccinations and we see, again, another absolute drastic drop where we can see no cases, I kind of see that happening in the near future.
The whole thing's a farce, Steve, for me. Like, I mean, I'm not football, just the whole thing in general. I'm sitting actually I'm like a grumpy old man sitting watching the news, like doing that shit.
I I don't watch it. I mean, my missus will go on. I mean, I'll flick through Sky News and Sky Sports News, but you look at Sky News or the BBC News or whatever, and it's just doom and gloom.
Yeah.
And you come off and you just think, bloody hell, you know, it's absolute, it's going tits up all the time. So
Yeah.
I think just sometimes for me, it's just like the takeover. Sometimes you just got to block it out and just get on with what you want to have to get on with.
Yeah, I agree, mate, 100%. It's the best advice we can give anybody who's watching this is just, you know, get about your life and try and forget about it, because honestly, it's you know, it will do your head in. Like Killingworth25 says, do you think WTO report has to be published before the decision? Do you think it'll have an impact? Well, of course, that's June the 16th, isn't it? It's next week that we're finally going to find out, you know, what all of this TV piracy thing's about. So maybe it is that, but as I said, like me and Steve have said before, nobody really knows. It's all clutching at straws, it's all speculation, and nobody really knows whether that's, you know, whether that's what we're waiting for. I mean, you know, a lot of people as well, I've had another laugh today, people are asking about Amanda Staveley and going, again, people read half a headline, but they're going, well, Amanda Staveley's got this Barclays thing now, so the takeover's on hold until she can sort that out. I mean, people forget she's a woman, she can multitask. She's not like us blokes who do one thing at a time. So I'm sure that if, you know, there's any issues crop up with the takeover, then Amanda Staveley will be, you know, she'll be dealing with it, or her husband will be dealing with it, or somebody else will be dealing with it. I mean, there's PCP, there's the Saudis and the Rubens. They're all involved in this takeover, aren't they? So, you know, I don't think that the Barclays thing is going to have much of an effect.
Well, it wouldn't, because it's got nothing to do with the takeover whatsoever. That's a personal thing. That's a different thing.
Yeah.
So why should it have an effect on that? I think the only thing would be the piracy thing, and obviously beIN Sports and kind of them kicking off, and as I said about the human rights stuff. But listen, as I said, it has gone on a little bit longer, but I think every day it goes on, every day you get a little bit closer. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, there's a few people asking about the interested parties. I mean, again, you know, it means nothing having an interested party, because at the moment, you know, it's PCP in the driving seat. I mean, I have seen the photograph of this Morris bloke, and I have to agree with somebody on Twitter today. They said the photograph that they're using of him, it looks like a 1970s high school photograph of this guy. But he's making all kinds of statements and saying that if he gets the opportunity to be put in front of the English Premier League, then his'll be passed in no time. I mean, it just looks to me, and we've had this before. We had it with one or two other, you know, potential takeovers. I remember a Northeast businessman who put himself forward, I think it was a year after Ashley bought the club. And it's people trying to make a name for themselves off the back of the takeover, off the back of the club, isn't it?
Well, some people are just doing it purely and utterly for publicity.
Yeah.
It gets their name out there. It gets their actual business and stuff like that. You know, and basically a lot of these people, some of them might have a lot of money. Some of them haven't. I mean, can you remember years ago when there was Michael Knighton, I think it was.
Yeah, that's
Carlisle,
right.
he tried to buy Man United.
Yeah.
You know, all that kind of thing. I mean, it's just absolute nonsense. You know, if you've got the money, then do something serious about it. Don't just pipe up in the papers and do it that way. Because in all fairness, that straight away shows to me that you just have to put publicity straight away, rather than going through the proper channels, keeping it quiet and saying nothing and doing it, having a serious bid, rather than my name's such and such, I do such and such, so there's my company out there straight away. Yeah. And then how many people are now looking at his company and different things. So no, not for me. I just like, when I see that kind of thing, I'll just flick over to the next page or just turn it off.
It's dead easy to do. I proved it with the Mayweather thing, you know, when we had Mayweather here in March, you know, just one little story and it just goes bang like wildfire. So, you know, I would like to think that shows everybody what the media are like when it comes to takeovers. Stu Roxburgh says, do either of you know why it's only Newcastle that people have a problem with having Saudi involvement, given that there's already 2 clubs in the Premier League that have Saudi investment? I don't know, Steve, do you?
No, listen, I think, I don't know, maybe people have thought that because where Newcastle were at one stage under Kevin and stuff and being so close, in all fairness, you'd have thought the vast majority of fans would want that kind of attractive football back again.
Yeah.
Because that's gone, you know, and everybody, you know, yourself, when we went into town, it was, everybody was, even the home fans of the other team, they were delighted to see you. And I think it would only be a good thing because it's more attractive players, more attractive football, and more money getting spent in the Premier League.
Holly Blade says it was the same with BZG last year. It was all played out in the media. It went quiet and then it was off. I think it was a little bit different with BZG. I mean, I genuinely didn't believe the BZG takeover was genuine because of the fact that Pete Redden, the DJ, was playing it all out on Twitter. But, you know, subsequently, having spoken to the Geordie Dentist, Neil Mitchell and Steve Hasty, it was a genuine attempt. They were behind it. They were involved. But unfortunately, the guy behind it, Midhat, you know, it trusted the wrong people, I think. And he'd eventually give his WhatsApp number, I think, to a Newcastle fan. And it became common knowledge. And it just ended up all over the internet. So, you know, sad but true in a way, Holly. But I do believe the PCP's attempt is a bit more genuine. W. Holden says, "I've learned how to complete the Rubik's Cube during lockdown. What have you two learned during this time?" Steve, what have you learned?
Patience.
Patience. Good one. Yeah, I think for me, I think patience is certainly one thing that I've learned as well. I haven't done what I said I was going to do, which was try and learn a language, but that's because ultimately, you know, you just don't have the time in your day. I've learned that the kids are better at teaching me than I'm teaching them. I think that's probably what I've learned. Wardler says, "Do you not think it would be the most typical Newcastle United thing to get taken over and then relegated this season?" I mean, again, it's something we've touched on a little bit last week, but you know, the fixtures are going to be. It's going to be different, Steve, isn't it? Because we'll start our games on the 21st, and then they're just going to come thick and fast. There's going to be no supporters there, obviously, for everybody. Our track record with injuries in a normal season wasn't great, soft tissue injuries, etc. You know, is the spectre of relegation still hanging over Newcastle, do you think, or is it just a case of, maybe we'll be all right?
Look, I mean, is there a chance? Of course there is. But at the same time, I think it's a very, very slim one. I mean, you know, the games are coming thick and fast. You're all allowed 5 substitutes now. But it's the same for the other teams. And the other teams, I think there's at least 3 or 4 other teams that's worse than Newcastle by far. You know, and them teams have got very, very tough run-ins as well. This was the major problem with if you were stopping the season now, do you go on average and all that, and some teams were kicking off and whatnot. But I would say I'm pretty confident that I think Newcastle will be okay, and that's even if they do get a couple of injuries. I think they've got, you know, a good squad there, and like just genuine lads, as far as I'm concerned. You know, good, honest, genuine lads that work hard. I mean, look, as there been games before this break that they've been poor, yes, but has every team been poor at some stage? Yes. But I think, you know, given the games that they've had or they've played, I would say 99% of the time they've put in a right good shift and getting something out of it. Sometimes they haven't, and sometimes, as I said, you know, probably Leicester and stuff like that, when they've played and they've been absolutely awful. But I think there's teams in this league that's in a lot worse position than Newcastle and will suffer from it. And some of them teams are a little bit or just out of that drop zone, and I think they'll get dragged in. But I don't think Newcastle, they'll lose a couple of games, but I think they'll pick up points as well.
Yeah. Mark D, NUFC, says it was Craig Hope who wrote the article in the Daily Mail, and it was arranged back in March, he said, in a second tweet. So, as I said, a story from, you know, a couple of months back, which is being brought out. Now everyone seems to think that it's because the takeover's off and Bruce is planning for the future. So, of course, it's something which, again, you know, has to be reported, I suppose, because people want to know what's happening with players, but slightly misleading and caused a bit of panic this morning. Chris Collins, some will down tools. It's talking about the players and not have the desire, ability, want to stay and fight. Some will look at it as a huge opportunity to potentially play for the richest club in the world. Hutchinson Heating says, who would be your first centre-half that you would buy in the transfer window, Steve?
It's a difficult one. As I said, I think when we did one of these initially, I'd mentioned Erling Haaland. And, of course, straight away it goes in the papers. Howie says get Haaland, which is just nonsense. I mean, look, there's a lot of good players out there. I think one of them's been mentioned. I think call him Calabou or something like that. The big lad who plays for, I think he's at Milan. I could be wrong. But people like that are very, very good players. But as I said, it's no point in slinging names around. I think that when the takeover does go through, there'll be agents, the phone will be ringing off the hook at Newcastle about trying to get players there, top players there, still want to cash in. But it's no good getting a good player if he's just wanting to cash in. You want him to come basically and show everybody why he is that good.
Yeah.
So, that's really the thing for me. It's a waste of time mentioning players because at the moment the takeover isn't done, and I think it would be a relatively not slow process, but I don't think you can just go out and go bang 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 because that's just a disaster waiting to happen.
Bill from the Toon says, are you concerned that in the past we are renowned for slow starters when the season commences again? So, I mean, yeah, I mean, we haven't set the world alight over the last few years at the start of a season. And I suppose in a lot of ways, Steve, it is a bit like the start of a new season, the amount of time we've had off. So, I mean, is that a concern?
Not really. Again, I think, everybody's kind of in the same boat with this, with what's happened. Listen, Newcastle have started at times not the best at the start of the season. I'm hoping, like every Newcastle fan, is that's not the case because by the time you try to recover, it's over, it's done. Because as we all know, the games are thick and fast, but you just hope that they can hit the ground running. I mean, as I said, it's a relatively tough running, but there's other teams that's got a lot harder.
Yeah, and Max says, good show, guys. Glad you're keeping away from the takeover a little. Twitter's non-stop, and those who seem to think they know their stuff still think that it will happen in time. Risa Sellers says, money doesn't make you happy whether you have it or not. Good point. Big Hop says, if the takeover goes through, how many games would he get? If we have Saudi owners, would we see Matty in centre midfield in 2 years? 90% of the fans would say no. I actually think that the club's offer after just 6 starts is fair, which isn't a bad point, Steve. You were telling us what you were on when you were in the first team on a regular basis. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I mean, look, times change and money's changed completely. But I think after 6 games, unless everybody can see that you're going to be an absolute superstar. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think the lad's going to be a good player.
Yeah.
But we're not talking world class here, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to them. If that was the case, then you could possibly understand. But 6 games, and I think even sometimes, I mean, even players that have burst onto the scene, they've kind of come in and then they've petered off a little bit, and then maybe come good again. But 6 games is nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing. I can understand. As I said, he wants the finance, he wants the security, but he's only young. That'll come if he's good enough. He'll get the money. But as I said, for me, I think he just needs to concentrate on his football, and that's easy for me to say that. But when you're getting offered 15 grand a week, 15 grand a week is a ridiculous amount of money when you've only played 6 games. It's just like me starting a new job, whatever it is, and then I've done 6 days and I'm wanting to be getting paid more or less the same level that's been there 20 years. It's not going to happen. It's not realistic. I don't see what the difference is, why football should be different.
Yeah. Craig Suggett, he's got a great surname and no the wonder. He says, evening lads, what influence did my uncle Colin Suggett have on the likes of you, Lee Clark, Robbie Elliott, Steve Watson in breaking into the first team when you were in the youth team? Colin Suggett, of course, top man. I had the pleasure of meeting him on numerous occasions. Very nice fella, and was always going to the games even when he wasn't involved in football as well. Top guy. But what kind of influence did he have on you, Steve?
He was a great lad, Subs. I mean, he used to join in the training, and of course, he used to kind of teach you the dark arts as well, kind of the stuff that you don't really see but goes on. I mean, obviously, he was looking after us, all the apprentices. I mean, sometimes he was in a monk. I mean, we used to turn up with Benwell. And, I mean, even if you absolutely properly cleaned it out, it still wasn't clean. That's when, apprentices then had to do the boots, they had to do the kits, they had to mop it out, they had to brush it out. We had to do all the baths, the showers, all kinds, absolutely everything. And if Sub was in a mood, he'd make sure the jobs were done absolutely perfect. And he knew a little trick that just because he was in a bit, as I said, just because he was in the mood, we would go around. I was head apprentice, and I would sort of say, so it's all done, and he would go, and he would flick a switch down, a light switch, and he would put his hand right just across the top, and there was a little bit of dust there. He would go, do it again. Everybody, do it again. And just because he was a little bit pissed off. But it learned you a valuable lesson. It's not done until it's done. And even then, it's not right. It's, you know, you've got to make sure, as I said, there's a saying, you don't stop practicing when you get it right. You don't stop practicing when you get it right. You stop practicing when you can't get it wrong. So you're always going to practice, to be quite honest. So he was brilliant at that, and he kind of gave you some life lessons. And I said the dark arts were very, very good, and some of them stayed with us.
Very good stuff. Yeah, well, thanks for that. And yeah, he's somebody who I think a lot of younger players who went on to make it, you know, owe a big thank you to. Tom Dixon says, do you think Newcastle will beat Man City in the Cup, Steve?
Why not? I mean, look, they've beaten them before. They've beaten them before at St James's when nobody gave Newcastle kind of any hope. Look, it's a one-off game. Who would have thought Wigan would have beat Manchester City in the final? Nobody. So is there a possibility? Absolutely. So whilst there's a possibility, you've got every chance.
Ferry Hill Mag says he's training for the Great North Run. Do we think it'll go ahead this year? Well, I've heard theatres talking about panicking about Christmas time, thinking pantomimes won't go ahead because, you know, at the moment, and I'm speaking from an event promoter's point of view, there has been no talk of venues opening up. So Great North Run, usually September, isn't it? I know that Brendan Foster certainly is planning towards it going ahead, but, you know, I mean, again, it comes back to what we're seeing on the streets over the last couple of days, protests going ahead, etc. I mean, what is the difference between running through London, you know, for a riot, or running through the streets to have a run? It's no different, really. But you know, I guess we'll find out as time goes on, Steve, won't they? They're going to have to pull the plug at some point.
Yeah, I mean, we just have to wait and see. You know, we've just got to hope that it doesn't spike again, and that R doesn't go up. Because I think in the northeast it's gone slightly up.
Yeah.
But you know, I think we have to look at that, and ultimately everybody's safety is paramount. So I think if there was the slightest chance of it maybe spiking again because of crowds, whether it's grounds, cinemas, runs, or whatever, I think you have to knock it on the head, which is unfortunate. But you'd rather that and just curtail it for another X amount of time rather than having another spike and then having to do it all over again.
Q-Tech says, how do you think the 5 substitutes rule will play out, Steve? Potential for lots of time wasting if abused?
Well, it's always added on anyway by the referees. I mean, look, there's always ways and means to waste a little bit of time. We all know what they are. But I think the 5 substitutes is a good idea, purely and simply because, you know, players haven't been given a great deal of time to get match fit. But then again, that's the same for all players. Every player would have been keeping themselves active and busy, and the clubs would have given them certain equipment that they needed to use in the house or the garage and stuff like that. But I think the 5 substitutes is a good idea. But as I said, you're never ever going to stop time wasting. I think you just need a strong referee to make sure he keeps on top of that.
Yeah. Silk says, are Newcastle arranging cardboard cutouts for home games and crowd noise through the loudspeakers like the German teams? I know that one member of the fans forum, Steve Hasty, was certainly looking into the cardboard cutouts, but no communication with the club whatsoever. So who knows? You know, you would like to think that if everybody's doing it, that Newcastle would certainly be doing some kind of crowd noise, but who knows? Sean Foreman says, is John Joe Shelvey underrated or overrated, Steve?
I think he's got potential to be a very, very good player. I think, unfortunately, because of one thing and another, and I would use temperament as a big word, I don't think he does like to what he should. I think we've all seen his passing range, how clever he is, how skillful he is on the ball. But I just think sometimes you look at him and you look at him and think his head's not in the right space. You know, he's lost it a little bit. You know, when he's on his game, he is a very, very good player. Just needs to do that more consistently.
Nameless Ghoul says, Steve, what are your thoughts on Joe Linton saying goals are not important? He obviously did a bit of an interview with the Evening Chronicle. He doesn't feel goals are that important.
Well, he must be the only man on the planet and the only woman on the planet that doesn't think they're important, because if you don't score goals, you don't win games. Whether he's just trying to play that down because of his lack of goals.
Yeah.
Listen, I said, me and you've had a debate about him so many times.
Yeah.
Just the fact that, as I said, I just think it wasn't his fault that the vast amount of money and stuff like that. But I totally agree, the frustration of the fans, because sometimes I'll think, you know, he'll lay the ball off and then jog. And I'm just thinking, you don't even want to score. You don't even want to get in the box. At least give yourself that opportunity.
Yeah.
I think part of me thinks he doesn't want to get in the box because he's frightened of missing. But listen, I mean, he's a forward player. He's not a centre forward, but every forward player wants to score goals. So every forward player would tell you goals are important. So whether he's misunderstood the question. If not the best of answers.
Definitely not. Colin Wilson says, which 3 teams do you think will go down, Steve?
I think probably it's the 3 that's there at the moment. I think Norwich are struggling. Villa have got a bit of a fighting chance, and I think then it's between the other ones. It'll be interesting to see how Villa do get back, because really they need Grealish to be on top of his game. If he suffers a slight injury and they miss him for 3 or 4 games, you can basically say Villa's going to go down.
Yeah.
But I would have thought the 3 teams there that's at the moment. Have I just seen a picture of your fireplace there?
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it?
What you do? What you showing us that for?
I pressed the wrong button.
Right.
Johnny Ball says, watching Shearer's Euro 96 programme last night, what were your words to Southgate after missing the penalty, Steve?
You just can't, you know, you kind of commiserating them, really. I think, first and foremost, I thought Gareth had a very, very good tournament. And I think whilst he got criticised for missing the penalty, for me, I thought it was so brave of him, because that's just a different game altogether. You know, standing up and sort of saying, I'll go forward, because there was 1 or 2 lads that didn't want to know. And Gareth put himself forward, unfortunately missed. I mean, look, it hasn't turned out too badly for him. But, I mean, honestly, what a great lad. He was a very, very good player, but great lad. And I'm so pleased for him what he's doing at England now, because I think he's transformed the team. He's transformed the kind of nation's hopes in some ways. You know, how close we were with the last competition. And I'm delighted for him. Look, it was one of them things. We all make a bad pass, a bad penalty or whatever. But, as I said, when it comes down to nitty-gritty, you know, the semi-final of the Euros at home, packed Wembley, it takes some bottle to do that. And I think, you know, I was watching Alan and Gary Lineker and Wrighty talking about penalties. Now, these are lads that practice just constantly. So, of course, it's second nature. But these players missed. You can't tell me Gareth had been practicing for years. He might have took he only took a couple of penalties in practice, in training. That does not prepare you. Well, nothing prepares you, actually, because you can take penalties till the cows come home in training. Nothing prepares you from taking that walk from the centre circle up to that. You're on your own. And it's a case of just going through your routine and striking through it. If the goalkeeper saves it, he saves it. But unfortunately, it wasn't the best of penalties from Gareth. But as I said, you know, the strength of character he showed to come back and play the way that he did afterwards for his club, afterwards for his country, and now look where he is. I think it's absolutely brilliant.
This has got to be the most bizarre question we've ever been asked. How did you two first meet? Any funny tales?
He kicked us out of a bar and pinned us up against the wall.
I'm pretty sure it wasn't as bad as that. Like, I think I was probably asking Steve for an interview or an autograph or something along those lines. Like, I think me and Steve, I used to have hair, believe it or not. And Steve,
I've just had mine.
Yeah, you have. But I remember Steve had a bit of hair and a bit of a goatee beard, and I was looking very similar. But me and Steve always had that similar look. But I remember getting his autograph a couple of times, and I certainly remember getting an interview. He was one of the few players in that generation who was keen to do a little interview for a fanzine at the time. And I remember sending a letter in and a stamped addressed envelope, and Steve replied within 2 weeks, full interview in there, and it was good. So that was our first introduction. But then after that, we've just, as you say, met when Steve was coming out with all the entertainers over the years, and I was working on the door. So some good days, Steve.
I'm sure it was one of the times I've tried to get in somewhere and you've stopped us and you went, you're not getting in. That's what for. And you said, it's your shoes. And I said, what's wrong with your shoes? And you said, you can't fucking stand up in them. I went, oh, all right then.
Classic, absolute classic. Aaron Turnbull says, what's your thoughts on season ticket holders not getting refunded? I mean, there's been no communication, Steve, really, has there? There's been nothing from the club. We've said, I think it's down to the fact that the takeover's ongoing and, you know, Ashley's left the building, hasn't he?
I was listening to Simon Jordan on Talk Sport, and he was talking about it. He's actually coming on the Kilimanjaro trip as well, to be fair.
Oh, good.
But it basically just sums Newcastle up, doesn't it? How much of the shambles it is. You know, these people with a hard-earned money, and you've just got this absolute debacle. So it needs sorting out, and it needs sorting out quickly, because at the moment it's just, again, in all fairness, at this particular moment, and I think under Mr. Ashley's regime, nothing really surprises you.
Definitely not. Q-Tech says, great interview that St. Maximum gave today. Gets the fans, he gets the area and settled quickly with his family. Does Steve Howey think it's a big advantage moving with your family rather than being a single lad when you come to a new club?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen the trials and tribulations of Keith Gillespie, you know, kind of being on his own. I mean, he did have somebody around him. I think his name was it Shea? And I'm not too sure. He had the biggest bouffant hair ever. He loved himself, to be quite honest. It was just as well he wasn't chocolate. Can you remember him?
I do, yeah.
You remember him? Oh, wow. I think you've just got to, if you are a single lad, you've just got to make sure you surround yourself with the right people, whether that's, you know, some of your family, your mum and dad or brother or sister or somebody, or really good friends that you've known for years. Because very, very quickly, you know, like it or not, you get hangers on and people who want to take advantage and kind of suck everything that they can out of you. Unfortunately, Keith didn't, while the lads were with him, we couldn't be with him 24 hours a day. And of course, then the gambling kind of sets in and whatnot. But obviously, if you've got a settled family, then that's brilliant. That's half the battle, because it's always nice to go back, you know, to your wife or your kids and stuff like that after training, and, you know, maybe let off a little bit of steam, or just try and forget football sometimes. You cannot be concentrating on football 24/7. Just do your head in. So you've got to have a switch off. And I think if you've got family or friends around, I think that's a huge help.
Wayne Gilmore says, as we've seen in the Bundesliga, home results are very different without the fans there. Given Newcastle's home form, how important are we as fans to the team, do you think? Do you think it's a concern? So, I mean, yeah, he's right. There has been a few, you know, strange results in the first couple of weeks back. Is that a concern for Newcastle?
I hope not. I mean, look, we all know how the Newcastle fans can be the 12th and 13th man on the pitch. I think in the Bundesliga, I think there's a third of home games being lost, which is a surprise. And I think it will be a little bit strange. I mean, I'm doing, actually, my first game back is the first game that got stopped through coronavirus, which is Man City and Arsenal. I'm doing that next Wednesday, and it's going to be quite surreal, really, sitting in the stadium, and basically you can hear the players and what they're saying.
Yeah.
Hopefully there will be that kind of noise and stuff like that. But I mean, I'm hoping it doesn't have too much of a detrimental effect on the players. I think they've just got to get their heads down, concentrate, focused, get the blinkers on, and try and get the job done.
Newcastle, of course, already, like a lot of teams, already played their first game. It was against, you know, Newcastle against Newcastle, of course, but Joe Linton scored, which you don't often hear me say, and Bentaleb scored as well. It was a 1-1 draw.
Well, I mean, as I said, I mean, you can obviously have the games behind closed doors and stuff like that. These teams are going to be in exactly the same position as Newcastle, let's be honest, and that's the top team out of the bottom team. It's going to be fair game, you know, and there could be some big surprises. You know, teams that's in the low part could easily win out of one of the higher teams and vice versa. So I think, you know, when it comes back, don't be surprised if there is big surprises.
It's probably, you know, worked in our favour, because, I mean, you know, we were without Dubravka, who I think is going to be our player of the season. Dummett's back. You know, I mean, we've got virtually everybody back apart from Willems, of course, who was long term. So, you know, it is going to work massively in a lot of people's favour. Work in Spurs' favour. Harry Kane was injured. Do you know what I mean? Looking at a big spell on the sideline. So, again, it's going to help them. So, yeah, I mean, it's swings and roundabouts for a lot of people. But, you know, it'll be, you know, you're right. There could be a few shocks. Scott Lappin says, cheer him up. Tell him a story about Gaza. I know you've got a few, Steve. Is there a good story you can tell him about Gaza?
I have, but you're going to have to come to one of mine and Steve's after dinners and I'll tell them then.
Yeah, he's a great guy, Gaza. You've got some good stories about him. And Scott Thompson saying, can you not get Gaza on for a talk? He's, you know, he has his ups and downs, I'm afraid. And at the minute, he hasn't been in a great place. Coming out of it now, but, you know, lockdown for somebody who's got addictions and problems like Paul, you know, it's one of them things. But he's not on the drink at the minute, which is good. But it's one day at a time for people like Paul. So I don't think coming on to something like this is something which would benefit him at this time. But I have spoken to him, and he's okay. He's on the mend. So, you know, that's the best we can say about Paul. Michael Wass says, what was it like taking part in Harry's Heroes?
Well, I got asked this question, I think, the other week.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I mean, obviously, being a part and being in the dressing room again and all that kind of thing was great. It was a little bit difficult because it's kind of stop, start. It's like, oh, can we do that again? Can we do that again? Obviously, you can't replicate the games, but there is a lot of kind of hanging about. Ultimately, in the end, it wasn't for me because it wasn't what I'd kind of basically signed up for. So I played all of the first series. I did all that. And then I did the first game in France. I would try to have a conversation with them. They wouldn't budge, so I left.
Fair play. GB Sports Tournament says, what's your thoughts on the performances of Newcastle this season, Steve? Personally, I think it's the worst I've seen us play in around 3 or 4 years. Dreadful. A few decent wins, but terrible performances.
Look, I think where the team is and the points that's accumulated, I think you'd take that over anything, because the simple fact is, look, if the team could have been playing lovely, attractive football and find themselves bottom of the league. You've just got to take the wins when you can get them and take the good performances when you get them. If you can have a good performance and then get a win, then it's absolutely happy days. Sometimes you just got to grind out a horrible point or get a lucky win or something. I mean, look, has the football been great at times? No, it hasn't. But then again, it hasn't been like kind of like that, or it has been like that for a long while. It's not just because of Steve.
Yeah.
I just think that, you know, the bringing in of players has to be a lot better. And I think this is going to be, when the takeover goes through, this is what's going to kind of possibly make or break Newcastle, is the signings. You know, the recruitment has to be a lot better. Homework has to be done about what players, you know, what are they capable of. And fair enough, you might get a top player that's well recognised, but it's up to get him motivated to make sure he shows everybody why they paid that amount of money for him. Why is he getting that money?
A. Taylor says, I've heard Dummett cannot play for the first team, even though he's over his injury. Have you heard this, lads? Well, it's a bit of a grey area at the minute, because obviously the final squads were submitted. Dummett was injured and wasn't expected to play again this season. But obviously that's one of the things that Premier League need to look at. There needs to be alterations to the squad, because like we discussed a little bit earlier in the show as well, that, you know, some people's contracts are going to be up when these games are on, and you know, there's all these little issues that need to be sorted out. But you would imagine that, you know, Dubravka, Kieran Clark, Dummett, who are all now fit, who weren't going to be playing in the back end of the season, you know, they're all going to be, you know, added to the squad. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Matty Longstaff's another interesting one, because obviously his contract's up before the season finishes. If he's going to sign for Udinese, then, you know, he's not going to be available. So, you know, it's uncharted territory. We've never been through this situation before. Eddie Garnett says, Steve, is the WTO report vital to the takeover? Again, we were talking about that earlier on. You must have missed it. But from our perspective, we don't know at all. It might be and it might not be. You know, 9th of June tomorrow, Blade and Races Day, they might announce it. But it could drag on to the 16th. It could drag on to July. Nobody really knows. And, you know, anyone who says they do know, other than the Premier League, Amanda Stabley or Mike Ashley is telling, is telling lies or speculating for whatever means. Carl Fowler says, good to see these carrying on. I've been enjoying them on YouTube the last week or so, part of the Takeover build-up now. Thanks, mate. Carl Thompson says, does the season ticket situation get resolved? For example, refunds, even if Mike Ashley doesn't sell, or does it lie at the door of the new owners? Well, again, it's to Mike Ashley if he retains the club, and it's to the new owners if they get it, Steve, isn't it, really?
Well, it is, yes. I mean, look, one way or the other, it's got to get sorted out. You can't just take people's money and then do nothing about it.
Yeah.
But as I said, you'd have thought the new owners coming in, they'll try and sort it out. And again, that could be just like a little niggly little thing that needs to be sorted out. But the sooner the better for the fans. Certainly, that's given their hard-earned money.
Yeah. John Bragg says, will we be putting this on YouTube? I missed most of this. Yes, John, we will be. They're all going onto YouTube, mate. And we'll be back on YouTube from the 22nd. It's just, from my perspective, like the lads, we're all doing this for free, mate. And, it costs money if you have X amount of hours on that wrap. What's that, sorry?
I said, Emma, you never told me it was free.
Well, none of us are getting paid.
You must have missed that and that small print that you sent me on that WhatsApp.
Mike Ashley did the contract. Luca says also about Barlaser, new contract, and he's been told he'll be in the first team next year, but Bruce hasn't seen him play. Well, yeah, as I said, that was a story that essentially that Craig Hope put out. So there's nothing we can really say about that. Look, it's a story that's been put out there, and if he stays, he stays. A6 Tuck says, as ever, great crack, lads. Thanks. A. Taylor says, heard that the WTO report is not legally binding. I think the Premier League will be on dodgy ground if they accept that. But again, we don't even know, if that is the case. We don't know if that's the case at all. Chris Collins, he says, how does Steve think the entertainers would do amongst the current big hitters in the Premier League?
Without being sort of big-headed, I think we'd be all right amongst them.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the players that we had, it was just an abundance of talent. Great players who not only were very, very good footballers, but just wanted it so much. Was such very, very close, very together. I definitely feel as though we'd be certainly up there challenging.
Yeah, me too, mate. 100%. I mean, my dad's actually been watching back through some of the entertainers' games that he kept, and he just says you forget how good it was. You know what I mean? Especially when you watch, we've watched so much football since, and he just says you forget how good that team was. Fantastic to watch, great atmosphere as well. Just and I said, well, we've just got to be thankful we were part of it, because it was. I think even if Newcastle won a trophy in the next 5 years under new owners, I don't think we'd get the same kind of football.
Yeah, I mean, it was just madness. I mean, as I said, sometimes when I look back at different things and you just think, wow, I mean, it was just a ridiculously good time. It was a fantastic atmosphere, week in, week out. To be a part of it, as I've said before, you just felt as though you were kind of blessed, really.
Yeah.
And that was just everything. It was being with, Kevin and Terry Mack and Arthur Cox and Derek Wright and all the lads, the backroom staff, Ray Thompson, Paul Ferris, people like that. George, who was the kit man as well, and Tony Toward. Everybody was together. And then you look at the players as well. And then on top of that, the fans and how the ground used to be absolutely buzzing. You just think, you were just so lucky and so privileged to be a part of that at that particular time.
Steve, time's beat us again. Great to have you on. We'll get you back on again next week, mate. Good luck with the walks, mate. Keep it going. It's I know you're aiming for for longer walks, etc. And that big challenge that's ahead once you get out of lockdown. But take care, mate, and I'll speak to you next week.
Absolute pleasure. Cheers, Steve.
Cheers, mate. Bye.
Bye.
Great to have Steve on again. I'm back in half an hour, guys. Really pushing it out this week. We're going to do a fans interview this time. Most of you will heard of Gallagher Shots. So I will be back on at 7:30 until 8:30 with Chris Wallace from Gallagher Shots. So join us at 7:30. I'm going to have a cup of tea and a bit crack with Chris after the break. If you've missed any of this, get yourself onto YouTube, follow Steve Wraith, and you will be able to watch all the shows that we've done over lockdown. But as I say, I'll be back at 7:30. Speak to you soon.